There's growing concern about a virus rapidly spreading among farm animals in Texas.
We have seen positive reports at multiple dairies in the Panhandle.
What does it mean for the safety of the food on your table? We get answers from the state's agriculture commissioner. Protests outside the courthouse over the controversial Texas immigration law. And one comment from the state's attorney is getting a lot of attention.
Now, to be fair, maybe Texas went too far, and that's the question this court's going to have to decide.
We look closer at the impact of this latest hearing and what comes next. And the man blamed for a deadly crash in a school bus should not have been behind the wheel. Our investigation digs into how the state tracks drivers with previous offenses and how this driver slipped through the cracks.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. There is growing concern about the spread of bird flu among farm animals in Texas. This week brought a new issue, a human case of the virus. A Texas dairy worker got sick after contact with infected cattle. Washington correspondent Maddie Beertemple reports health officials say there's little risk to the public right now, but they are monitoring the virus.
The Centers for Disease Control says it's only the second time a human has contracted avian flu in the U.S.
This was an individual who had close contact with sick cattle.
Texas State Health Services spokesman Chris Van Duzen says the exact transmission path isn't clear, but it's possible that infected birds contaminated cattle feed, sickening cows, and then the person. He says the worker's case is mild, but the state is closely watching other infected cattle.
We have seen positive reports at multiple dairies in the Panhandle.
Cattle in Michigan, Kansas, and New Mexico have also tested positive, and the bird flu is affecting birds as well. The country's largest producer of eggs, Cal-Maine Foods, reported an outbreak at a Texas facility. The company slaughtered nearly 2 million chickens. While rare in the U.S., around the world from 2003 to February of this year, 887 people contracted bird flu and 462 died from it, according to the World Health Organization. The CDC says the risk to humans is low because there's no indication right now it can spread from person to person.
Really importantly, cows aren't humans.
Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis is director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases.
What we know to date is we have one case in a human, and that person is doing great.
Daskalakis says it is still safe to consume pasteurized dairy products.
We pasteurize milk for a reason, and that's because it kills bacteria and viruses.
He says people who work with livestock should limit their exposure to sick animals, and all of us should avoid handling dead birds. In Washington, I'm Maddie Beertemple.
While the risk for human spread is low, there are questions about what the virus means for the safety of food like milk and eggs. For insight, we're joined by Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
And that's quite the studio you have there.
Thank you. I'm coming from my Ford Expedition studio today.
Well, thanks for making time. We're going to dive right in. What do Texans need to know about the spread of avian flu among livestock? Is this affecting the food supply?
Well, you know, I have a duty to protect the consumer, but I also have a duty to the farmers and ranchers. So let's talk about both. We've had an outbreak of avian influenza in a laying hen operation in Farwell, Texas. We're depopulating that facility, which we had 1,600,000 laying hens and another 377,000 pullets. So those are all going to have to be destroyed. We've also had it in our milking herds. First time ever. That's a first. We weren't expecting that. But we do not have to depopulate those dairy cows. They actually get over it in about a week. It's kind of like they have the flu for a week, and then they're fine. So those are going to be okay. And then the third leg, we actually had a human contracting. One of the dairy workers came down with the bird flu. Very mild case. He had like pink eye-like symptoms, and that was it. He's over it in a few days. Now, none of the eggs or the poultry got into the food chain. None of the milk got into the food chain. However, if the milk had gotten into the food chain, we pasteurize that. So the pasteurization process would have killed the pathogens. And if any of the eggs or poultry meat had gotten into the food supply chain, those are cooked. And so, the only way you could get it is by eating raw chicken or raw eggs. The only person I ever saw eat raw eggs was Rocky Balboa. I don't think he's doing that anymore. So I think we're okay. It wasn't widespread enough that we're going to have a run on grocery stores on eggs and milk. Won't change the price. It's not going to be reflected in a shortage or anything like that. So food's safe, no shortage in supplies. On the farmers' end of it, we're asking them to increase biosecurity, have their farm workers use respiratory protection, eye protection, disinfect vehicles coming in and off the property, limit the number of visitors on the facilities, etc., like that. This is spread by waterfowl, so we're encouraging at least the dairy farms to isolate cows from ponds of water that might have had waterfowl on it, disinfect their own water troughs and feeding facilities.
Yeah, so you mentioned waterfowl. Specifically, do you know why this right now is happening? Was there a particular incident? Does anything need to change to prevent something like that from happening again?
Well, we had a mysterious disease going through our dairy herd in West Texas and the Panhandle. Went through about 40% of the herds before we figured out what it was. We were testing for cattle diseases. We've never had bird flu in cattle. Someone noticed that there were some dead birds at one of the dairies and thought, hey, we better test for bird flu. So we did, and it came back positive. So now we actually have it in 6 states total. But like I said, it's not a big problem. It's not going to put any dairymen out of business. It's not the end of the road. We don't have to depopulate the cows. That they have a mild illness that lasts about a week, and then they're back in the milking parlor, and we're doing fine. Some economic hit to the dairy farmers, but not enough to make them go bankrupt.
You know, this virus is hitting as ranchers in the Panhandle are already dealing with the aftermath of the state's largest wildfire. How's this affecting the state's agriculture industry?
Well, these cattle are in the same part of the state. It's also the area where we have our largest concentration of feedlot cattle, probably 10 times more of those than dairy cattle, actually. But the beef cattle aren't showing symptoms. They don't get it. This is only found in lactating dairy cows and only in the older lactating dairy cows. The young heifers, the pregnant females, they don't get it. So it's not connected to the fires. Some people thought it might have been the smoke inhalation, but it's not. The smoke went the other way, wasn't anywhere near the dairies. So we're recovering in the Panhandle, 2,000 square miles of burnt ranch land up there, 1,300,000 acres, almost 10,000 cattle burnt. We're going to have to dispose of another 20,000 is my estimate for burnt hooves and burnt udders and smoke inhalation. So we're in the recovery phase. We still need hay, fencing materials. My website is open for our STAR Fund. That's where we collect money to help these farmers buy a new fence post and wire. That's called the STAR Fund. Our hay hotline's up and running, and our mental health helpline is up and running. The Agri-Stress Helpline, and it's a suicide mental health helpline and resource to get these farmers and ranchers the help they need.
All right, good resources to put out there. Thank you so much, Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, guys. God bless.
The Special House Committee investigating the Panhandle wildfires held 3 days of hearings last week. They met in Pampa near Amarillo to hear testimony on how to better prepare and respond to fires. The Smokehouse Creek fire was the worst in Texas history, scorching more than 1 million acres in the Panhandle. The special committee heard hours of testimony from dozens of invited witnesses as well as members of the public. Poor communication before and during the fires was one issue discussed during the hearings. In particular, the committee looked at the delays in deploying federally contracted aircraft to fight the fire. The goal is to find solutions before the next big fire. One lawmaker on the committee called on the state's Department of Insurance to act.
Why can't the Department of Insurance impose maintenance requirements on companies that provide these sort of utility poles, utility lines, and oil and gas equipment before they put it on these people's property? Why can't that be part of the financial responsibility?
I'm not aware of us having any statutory authority to
I
impose.
said, why can't they?
Chairman Ken King told us the investigative committee will have its formal report ready for the legislature by May 1st. They expect to work throughout the summer and the fall to prepare legislation for lawmakers to consider in the next session. Lawyers from Texas go back to court, arguing to restore the state's controversial immigration enforcement law. But find out why one comment from the state's attorney is getting a lot of attention from people who say the Texas law goes too far. And a truck driver blamed for a deadly crash with a school bus. But federal records show he should have been stopped from being on the road. We look at how he could have slipped through the cracks. Lawyers for Texas went back to court Wednesday, arguing to restore the state's controversial immigration enforcement law known as Senate Bill 4. That law is on hold as legal challenges play out in court. A three-judge panel of the Federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard some of the most significant arguments yet in this case. As Ryan Chandler shows us, one comment from the state's attorney got a lot of attention.
Protest in New Orleans.
We hope that the judges would listen to legal precedent.
As Texas takes the fight over the border back to federal court. While defending Texas's power to arrest and deport illegal immigrants, the state's attorney acknowledged that Texas may have pushed the legal limits.
They have tried to develop a statute that goes up to the line of Supreme Court precedent, but allows Texas to protect the border. Now, to be fair, maybe Texas went too far, and that's the question this court's going to have to decide.
The three-judge appeals panel weighing the constitutionality of the law after blocking it from taking effect last month.
It makes all of our communities less safe.
Back in Austin, immigrant advocates are already wary.
The conversations are really about fear, about whether they're going to be separated from their family, about whether if they're currently in an immigration process and they have a work permit and they have a driver's license and they have a job, if they're going to be affected by this law, which they may be.
Texas sought to downplay those concerns in court, clarifying the statewide law would almost exclusively be enforced on the border.
There wouldn't be probable cause in almost all cases unless a Texas officer sees somebody crossing the border.
The case is nearly certain to end up in front of the Supreme Court. Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
Attorney General Paxton said the oral argument from Texas shows the state did not go too far with SB 4. He posted a comment on the social media platform X saying, quote, "In context, it was clear that the matter of whether Texas went too far in light of the Arizona versus United States SCOTUS decision was the question before the court. As counsel explained, Texas has gone as far as Arizona versus United States allows." Senator John Cornyn elaborated on that point Thursday at a news conference in Austin. He believes the Supreme Court will ultimately decide whether the Texas law will stand.
Well, it's a fine line, and because this Arizona case decided years ago said that basically the state can't enforce federal immigration law, but what the state can do here is enforce state law that doesn't implicate the federal government's authority on the border security and immigration. It's a fine legal line, but I think what Governor Abbott and the legislature are trying to do is find a way to protect our state and our citizens when the Biden administration simply refuses to do so.
Texas has already been arresting migrants under state trespassing laws. State law enforcement also started charging migrants accused of cutting through razor wire placed along the Rio Grande. For example, on Tuesday, 2 men from Brazil and another from Ecuador faced charges of criminal mischief in El Paso. National Guard troops said they saw the men cut through a wire fence to get to the border wall. The El Paso District Attorney's Office estimated they caused $750 worth of damage. The men remained in custody after the hearing, telling the court they did not have enough money to post a $1,000 bond. Also, more than 200 asylum seekers are jailed on state charges in El Paso County after a confrontation at the border. Last month, a large group of migrants pushed their way through border barriers. Prosecutors say they assaulted National Guard members who tried to stop them. 9 migrants faced felony charges, but most of the jailed migrants faced the misdemeanor charge of participating in a riot. They also face federal charges of improper entry into the United States, which could get them deported. El Paso District Attorney Bill Hicks said it's important to also prosecute them on state charges.
If they're willing to assault government officials, what stops them from assaulting our friends, our neighbors, our mothers and fathers in those neighborhoods? We have to send the message that you cannot do that we have to be a community of law and order.
The arrests placed the El Paso County Jail near capacity. Hicks said taking on these cases would not hinder prosecution of other crimes in the county. The man blamed for a deadly crash with a school bus should not have been behind the wheel. Our investigation digs into how the state tracks drivers with previous offenses and how this driver slipped through the cracks. Plus, a mistake takes Medicare benefits away from some Texas retirees, and it can take months to fix the problem. We look closer at one case of a man trying to get those benefits back. A 5-year-old and a college doctoral student are dead after a concrete pump truck collided with a school bus on a rural Texas highway. Police say the truck driver admitted to doing drugs earlier in the day. We found federal records showing the truck driver legally was not allowed to be behind the wheel due to previous drug violations on his record. Public safety reporter Brianna Hollis looks into how the Texas Department of Public Safety tracks those kinds of infractions and asks why the driver in this case was not flagged before the crash.
This is a 9-page order from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration that concrete pump truck driver Jerry Hernandez signed from his hospital bed. Last week, we learned from his arrest affidavit that authorities say he admitted to using cocaine in the early morning hours before the 2 p.m. crash, as well as marijuana the night before and only sleeping a couple of hours. 5-year-old Ulysses Montoya, a pre-K student with Hayes CISD, and 33-year-old Ryan Wallace, a University of Texas doctoral student, died in the crash. Video from the school bus shows the truck veering into oncoming traffic. According to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Hernandez, quote, was currently prohibited from operating commercial motor vehicles at the time of the crash because of previous positive drug tests. Those drug violations were noted in a database used to track the statuses of commercial licenses, begging the question, why wasn't Hernandez's case flagged sooner? We asked the Texas Department of Public Safety how it monitors when drivers get added to this database. DPS says the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division only takes a driver off the road if they're caught during a roadside inspection or through an audit. And we now know through these documents and others, the concrete pump truck Hernandez drove is actually exempt from roadside inspections in the state of Texas. Now, we want to get some more clarification on why exactly that code's in place. We followed up with law enforcement as well as reached out to lawmakers to dig deeper on that. Brianna Hollis, State of Texas.
For further context, failing to comply with a commercial vehicle violation can result in fines up to nearly $7,000 from the feds. And according to the Department of Transportation, knowing or willful violations can result in criminal penalties. A mistake took his Medicare benefits away, and he's not the only one affected.
For me, it's a crisis, and for other people like me, we're the silent majority that suffers.
We asked the state for answers and the effort to help people get their benefits back. Last summer, we first reported that the Texas Health and Human Services Department improperly removed about 100,000 Texans from Medicaid, including thousands of children. We first thought the error only affected Medicaid recipients. Now, we've learned some retirees lost certain Medicare benefits due to mistakes by Texas Health and Human Services. Our Ryan Chandler introduces us to one senior who found out what it's like to lose those benefits and face the long effort to get them restored.
That I applied to have my benefits reviewed the 1st of December.
For 4 months, Ed Heimlich desperately refreshed his benefits page.
I just don't understand why this is not a priority.
At 69 years old, living on $970 a month from Social Security, he gets by with a roommate and food stamps.
It's just really a struggle.
When he missed out on benefits under Texas's Medicare savings program, his monthly check dropped to $775. Every month he waits for approval is another month relying on a food pantry.
I've lost 8 months of benefits, $1,300. And when your income is less than $1,000 a month, that is a lot. That hurts.
Texas Health and Human Services confirms other seniors were kicked off that same assistance by mistake, telling us quality assurance measures found individuals were erroneously removed from the Medicare savings program, assuring us coverage has already been reinstated or is in the process of being reinstated. 4 months after Ed applied for benefits, we reached out to HHS about his case. They reinstated his benefits that day. Now, HHS says he initially lost his benefits because of his own error, not theirs. But still, Ed worries for the seniors who are still waiting for the state to fix their mistakes.
Well, for me, it's a crisis. Right. And for other people like me, we're the silent majority that suffers.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
This is not the first time we've seen problems with benefits handled by the state. We've been reporting for more than a year about delays with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Like Medicare, SNAP is operated by the federal government, but the state issues the funds. Texas Health and Human Services faced federal scrutiny over those delays. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.